And welcome, Strange Seeds. You're listening to the Primordia podcast, your source for strange. Open your mind, take off that flesh suit, and dive into primordial waters as we swim through the mystical and magical, weird phenomenon, unsettling synchronicities, and the truly terrifying. I'm your host, Britt. From unicellular slime to reptilians to near-perfect, human-like beings with superior intelligence, Venusians have been described in so many different ways by so many people. For years, there have been supposed sightings of Venusians, their spacecraft, and their technology. Venus has also made its way through history as a sacred entity, a famed goddess, and the twin planet to our own Earth Mother. If you fancy ufology, or you're into studying aliens, extraterrestrials, ultraterrestrials, whatever you want to call them, you might be familiar with the name George Adamski. Born in Poland in 1891, George Adamski and his family moved to America when he was only 2 years old, and due to economic hardship, he was forced to drop out of school during the 4th grade. After serving in the 13th U.S. Cavalry Regiment on the Mexican border, Adamski made a life working in maintenance at Yellowstone National Park, a flour mill, a concrete factory, and other places. Having formed a keen interest in theosophy, some claim that he was specifically inspired by Madame Blavatsky and her Theosophical Society. Adamski founded a theosophical society of his own that he named the Royal Order of Tibet in the early 1930s. The Royal Order of Tibet actually received a special government license to make wine during the Prohibition for quote-unquote religious purposes. Adamski and some of his followers decided to purchase roughly 20 acres of land in the deserts of California. The followers ran a small cafe on the side of the road leading up to the observatories in Paloma, while Adamski gave lectures to passerbys about his theories and religious ideals. Adamski released a photograph of what he claimed to be a UFO, a scout ship, in 1947. While some, to this day, adamantly believe these photographs to be authentic, others claim that it is simply a chicken brooder and some light bulbs. Adamski then says he encountered and photographed Venusian scout ships in the early 1950s and had personal encounters with several Venusians themselves over a period of a few years. He states during many of his lectures that the government also previously knew about the existence of UFOs and otherworldly visitations to Earth. Could it be that Adamski was one of the first to shed light on government conspiracies? Though some consider him a fraud or con artist, he was considerably popular among the science fiction crowd at the time, with 2 of his books becoming bestsellers. His sighting was also around the time of the Roswell incident and the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, which had already begun to ignite public interest in the topic of UFOs and intelligent life from other worlds. His first book, Flying Saucers Have Landed, was ghostwritten by his counterpart due to his unfortunate illiteracy and sold close to 200,000 copies. Whether you believe in his story or not, there's no denying that George Adamski has gone down in history as one of the first modern humans to claim contact with an extraterrestrial. The Venusians Adamski claimed to have met include Orthon. There's actually a painting of this figure as portrayed by Adamski, and Adamski would show this painting at his conferences to show the likeness of Orthon, a Nordic-looking fellow with long blonde hair and light skin. He also claimed to have met other Venusians, though different sources say different things about those other Venusians. Valiant Thor. Probably one of the most famous Venusians, Valiant Thor was presumably present at one of Adamski's conferences, though I can only find one source to verify this. He and 2 other Venusians landed in a farm in Virginia in 1957, where Valiant Thor requested that he meet with the President of the United States, who happened to be Eisenhower. He was questioned continuously by the U.S. government about his claims, even having been sequestered to an area of the Pentagon for some time, or something like that. Some people witnessed, quote-unquote, Valiant Thor walk through walls and wave his hand over a supposed Venusian spacesuit, joining two sides of the suit perfectly without leaving a visible seam. There is an alleged photo of Valiant Thor that you can easily find on Google. Just Google his name, or any search engine that you use, just search his name, Valiant Thor, and you will see. He looks different from the other Venusian descriptions that you read or see, in that his hair is much darker. The photograph is black and white, so it's hard to tell as far as his complexion. But his hair is much darker. It is not the typical Nordic blonde hair. Omnec Onec, the woman from Venus. Omnec Onec was born to Venus on the astral plane at a higher vibration and density than our third density vibration that we live here on Earth, on this plane. When she was 7, she was able to lower her density, entering into the body of a young Sheila Gibson in order to manifest here on Earth. She was able to keep her knowledge of previous incarnations during her travels to Earthrealm to assist and continue her path here. Her autobiography, From Venus I Came, which was written in 1991 by a U.S. colonel and UFO researcher, Wendell C. Stevens, recounts her story. You can find her story online. She also has created this really neat little visual concept video that you can find on YouTube or online that shows, it's basically a visual representation of her story that sums it up quite nicely. Mollie Thompson, From Worlds Afar, is a vinyl that she had privately released and pressed in 1966. You can listen to a couple of the songs online or purchase the vinyl. Supposedly, this vinyl was inspired by Adamski. The private pressing of the vinyl was released the year of his death, though I'm not sure if there was actually a correlation. Mollie Thompson, according to a book describing her, and basically an ordinary British housewife at the time, reports that she channeled 3 particular Venusians named Ornur, Lon, and Philemon, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing these, through a Ouija board seance session of all things. She wrote songs about typical life on Venus, what Venusians were like, and what life on Earth might look like if we were to continue on a path of destruction. Mollie Thompson, interesting figure, very interesting vinyl. It has a very, folky, light, fairy-like quality about it. Definitely check it out, or check out the few songs that are available online if you don't want to purchase the vinyl. Dolores Barrios. Is she a clever Venusian, or just a fashionable human? During a UFO conference near or in Paloma in late 1950s, George Adamski was giving a speech about Venusians that he had recently encountered. After he presented a painting of a Venusian entity he referred to as Orthon, audience members conveniently and suddenly noticed 3 people with striking features, 1 woman and 2 men. Dolores supposedly exhibited large eyes and other features that made her a suspect Venusian in disguise, according to many in the audience. She and her 2 male companions were asked numerous times for their permission to be photographed and interviewed, initially being reluctant. In fact, allegedly, during an attempt at photography, the trio were startled enough that they fled into the woods. They did eventually open up enough with questioners to provide basic information. When asked if she were a Venusian, Dolores, who claimed to be a fashion designer from New York, simply smiled and stated, quote, "No." She told those who questioned her that she was there because she was interested in the topic, and that she believed Adamski's claims that the people he encountered were in fact from Venus. Sanat Kumara is another figure said to have originally hailed from Venus as one of the 7 holy Kumars sent to Earth to help humans ascend spiritually, along with other members of a group known as the Lords of the Living Flame. But because Sanat Kumara is such an interesting figure in itself, we're going to cover this in more depth in a later episode. In the book The Law of One, the social memory complex known as Ra, who the questioners speak to at lengths through specific channeling methods in the volumes that make up the Raw Material series, claims to have originated from Venus, existing at a different density than our current 3rd density state here on Earth. Sound familiar? Ra and its Venusian counterparts, existing in the 6th dimension, traveled to Earth by thought long ago in the Earth's past. Here's a passage from the book. Now, I'll just preface this by saying, if you're not familiar with this book, I highly recommend it. I highly recommend all of them. I am currently making my way through the series myself. They are available in PDF form. You can download them for free or purchase them directly from the L&L Research or the LL Research Group's website, which I will link in the episode description. The format of this is set up almost like an interview session, and I won't say much more. I'll just go ahead, let's dive right in. Questioner: how were you able to make the transition from Venus? Did you have to change your dimension to walk upon the Earth? Ra: I am Ra. You will remember the exercise of the wind. The dissolution into nothingness is the dissolution into unity, for there is no nothingness. From the 6th dimension, we are capable of manipulating, by thought, the intelligent infinity present in each particle of light or distorted light, so that we were able to clothe ourselves in a replica visible in the 3rd density of our mind, body, spirit complexes in this 6th density. We were allowed this experiment by the council which guards this planet. Questioner: where is this council located? Ra: I am Ra. This council is located in the octave or 8th dimension of the planet Saturn, taking its place in an area which you understand in 3rd dimension terms as the rings. Ra then goes on to assert that the UFOs that Adamski and others claim to have seen in the 1950s and onwards were not Venusian scout ships. In fact, according to Ra, they weren't from Venus at all. Here's another excerpt from the book. Questioner: the disc-shaped craft that we call UFOs, some have been said to have come from the planet Venus. Would any of these be your craft? Ra: I am Ra. We have used crystals for many purposes. The craft of which you speak have not been used by us in your space-time present memory complex. However, we have used crystals and the bell shape in the past of your illusion. Questioner: how many years in the past did you use the bell-shaped craft to come to Earth? Ra: I am Ra. We visited your peoples 18,000 of your years ago and did not land. Again, 11,000 years ago. Questioner: photographs of bell-shaped craft and reports of contact of such from Venus exist from less than 30 years ago. Do you have any knowledge of these reports? Ra: I am Ra. We have knowledge of oneness with these forays of your space-time present. We are no longer of Venus. However, there are thought forms created among your peoples from our time of walking among you. The memory and thought forms created, therefore, are a part of your social memory complex. This mass consciousness, as you may call it, creates the experiences once more for those who request such experience. The present Venus population is no longer 6th density. When asked to elaborate on what life was like on Venus, and consequently the other planets that were, are, or will be inhabitable, and what life was like in its current state there, Ra had this to say. We take the one known as Venus. This planetary sphere was one of rapid evolution. It is our native Earth, and the rapidity of the progress of the mind-body-spirit complexes upon its surface was due to harmonious interaction. Upon the entity known to you as Mars, as you have already discussed, this entity was stopped in mid-third density, thus being unable to continue in progression due to the lack of hospitable conditions upon the surface. This planet shall be undergoing healing for some of your space-time millennia. The planet which you dwell upon has a metaphysical history well known to you, and you may ask about it if you wish. However, we have spoken to a great degree upon this subject. The planet known as Saturn has a great affinity for the infinite intelligence, and thus it has been dwelled upon in its magnetic fields of time-space by those who wish to protect your system. The planetary entity known to you as Uranus is slowly moving through the first density and has the potential of moving through all densities. Interestingly, Ra also claims that divination by means of tarot was founded by Venusians, lending to the idea that Venusians are superior to Earthlings in both intelligence and spirituality. Ra states from the book, I am Ra. The concept of the tarot originated within the planetary influence you call Venus. Questioner. Was the concept given to or devised for a training tool for those inhabiting Venus at that time, or was it devised by those of Venus as a training tool for those of Earth? Ra. I am Ra. The tarot was devised by the third density population of Venus, a great measure of your time-space in your past. As we have noted, the third density experience of those of Venus dealt far more deeply and harmoniously with what you would call relationships with other selves, sexual energy transfer work, and philosophical or metaphysical research, the product of many, many generations of work upon what we conceive to be the archetypical mind produced the tarot, which was used by our people, as a training aid in developing the magical personality. Questioner. I'll make a guess that those of Venus of third density, who were the initial ones to partially penetrate the veil, gleaned information as to the nature of the archetypical mind and the veiling process, and from this designed the tarot as a method of teaching others. Is this correct? Ra. I am Ra. It is so. Now again, these are very interesting books. Even if you take their contents with a grain of salt, I do think they are worth the read. I would actually like to make a short series in this podcast about the books themselves because they are so intriguing, and because I found myself pausing on a page to do research on something mentioned so many times, and I love books that make you think one way or the other, even if you're playing the devil's advocate and researching counter evidence. Alright, and some reading recommendations for you guys. If you're interested in science fiction stories related to Venus, I recommend checking out H.P. Lovecraft's The Shadow Out of Time or In the Walls of Eryx. That one's about a mining prisoner trapped on Venus, which was actually co-written with Lovecraft by Kenneth J. Sterling in an old magazine. Lucky Starr in the Oceans of Venus by Isaac Asimov, or really anything in the Asimov world. He's basically the father of the laws of robotics. Check it out, Lucky Starr in the Oceans of Venus. Flying Saucers Have Landed by George Adamski. From Venus I Came by Omnec Onec. Stranger at the Pentagon by Frank Strangus. And last but not least, The Raw Material, The Law of One, Books 1 through 4 by McCarty, Elkins, and Rueckert. And that wraps up this very first ever episode of the Primordia podcast, your source for strange. If you are someone or you know someone who has a strange story to share, whether it's alien-related, a case of deja vu, spooky stuff, or just an off-putting situation or occurrence, We'll feature it on our next episodes. Please send us a message at primordia.bwc@gmail.com or shoot us a message or submit a post over on Facebook or Instagram. The links for those will be in the podcast description. As always, thank you so much for listening. Stay strange.